Aaron Douglas here with Scott Johnson, Axiomport, etc. And Scott, we're here today to talk about what you are passionate about. What would that be?
After thinking about it for a while, I think the thing that I've always been passionate about my whole life is art and design. And it probably didn't start out quite that clearly defined as a little kid because that's when it began, but I've always liked drawing, I've always liked creating, and it's not something I cannot do. And so that's my topic, art and design.
What, for people who aren't in the creative field, what's the distinction that you see between art and design?
For me, art is everything from extreme fine art, the things that you go into a gallery and see and may not completely understand, all the way up to illustration, which is more of a commercial art form. And then design, to me, is kind of the other side of that, where you have a client that is coming to you with a problem, a need of some sort that they want a design solution for that. And it can be, there's kind of a blending point where sometimes the art becomes the design solution. We've actually had that happen in our office before, and I can go into a little bit more detail, but those are sort of the two sides. And for me, design, you know, there's fashion design, there's industrial design, product design, lighting design, furniture design. For me, it was always graphic design. So that's kind of where I always more of a 2D, and now, of course, that's evolved into digital art form as well.
Interesting. So design, as I hear it, is the application of art to a problem.
Very much.
And I'm not even going to ask you to define art. I think we know it when we see it.
Yeah, well, you're right.
When early in your life did you recognize that you had this passion for art and design?
You know, it really was as far back as I can remember, because I was thinking about this after we talked. I used to have books when I was a little kid that would have blank pages at the back. Maybe they didn't have enough text to fill out the signature or whatever. I thought those pages were for drawing on. Any blank paper was for drawing on. And my mom's brother, my uncle, was an art director in Indianapolis at Caldwell Van Riper back in the 60s. And so I kind of had a sense of what commercial art was about from the sort of that Mad Men era. And I started there. I started drawing, and then that evolved as I went through school and learned more.
In the mumbledy years that you've been doing art and design, how have you seen it evolve from that boy who drew in books to the man you've become today?
Right. You know, a lot of different ways. A lot of it's school related, but a lot of things I as I said at the beginning, I kind of always drew. I just felt like I had to. And I was fortunate to have some friends that would entertain me on that. A couple of friends of mine as a young kid, we would get together, and if it was a sleepover, instead of playing games necessarily, we might draw, or we might do things, because that's something I like to do. And as I got into high school, I learned about perspective, and you get kind of the basic still life drawing things. And into college, I think it just kind of continued to grow. Once I went to college, and I think my freshman year, I discovered a book called Communication Arts, a magazine, a periodical. It's also known as CA. It's just kind of the grandfather of art directing, graphic design publications. And it was, you know, like that spark went off. It was the first time I was like, oh, I get this. You know, even though I had a relative that was in the industry, he'd kind of gotten out of it by the time I was old enough to know what was going on. And I saw some of the most compelling ads where great copy and great art production came together, and you're like, that's what it's about. And
so there was this epiphany of, this is a thing that people do.
And I can get paid for it, even better, because I'm going to do it one way or the other.
Yeah.
I had a partner for many years before Axiomport, and we used to say, this is as close to doing what we would do anyway and being paid for it, because we really liked the creation of the art. I do feel like that's evolved over the years, and there's not as much hands-on the illustration industry, for instance, the photography industry, they've been impacted pretty significantly over the last 10 years by stock photography, stock photo sites, so you can download a photo in a matter of minutes. There are still a lot of really good, talented photographers making a living doing that. There are a lot fewer talented illustrators doing that. There are still a lot of them around, and we work with them whenever we can, but the industry shifted a lot because of some of the digital capabilities that we all have at our fingertips now. But I'm also seeing things like typography. I've got a daughter who's just graduated from college and in graphic design, and she brings to me, hey, did you see this website where they show this really cool typography? And she did a lot of three-dimensional sculpture work in college, and typography became sort of a form for her to work within and a way to message.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so and it was interesting for me, knowing I love art and design, because she's studying graphic design, and she was studying sculpture, three-dimensional things, just like I did 20-some years ago. But she's really applying it much more strategically. So I'm seeing a lot of things, even though some aspects of my earlier design years have sort of changed, some other, in a not so positive way, some other good things are starting to find their way forward at the same time.
Do you think that this digital medium, is this a evolution in the industry or a temporary shift? The question being tied to your point of there are ways in which art and design have been created in the past that are less in demand. However, I don't think there's no less need for that creative. I think people just think they can get it some other way. As anyone who's ever tried to find the perfect picture on a stock photography site has found it doesn't exist there.
Right.
Do you see the art and design as an industry evolving, or is it just shifting in the way that the consumer thinks about it?
That's a good question. My first reaction was as you were saying that, I was going to say it's definitely evolved, and in fact, maybe even more than an evolution, it could be considered a revolution because it's changed so dramatically. But as you clarified your point there, I think you make a good point in that it has shifted in a way that I think design has become a lot more democratic. It used to be that you had to go to an art director and he would hire an illustrator or a photographer, and he'd hire a typesetter, and he'd hire all these specialties. That's why he was the art director. He directed all the art. I think a lot of people now know that they can go with some fairly limited skills, create something on their own, design it, lay it out. People talk about fonts. The generation before us, nobody talked about fonts but people in the industry. Now everybody knows a handful of fonts and they want to select what's right. To your point, they can go to a stock website and download a photograph, and even with the Shutterfly and Blurb and the different websites where you can actually publish your own books, whether it's a photo book or a written piece of fiction, it's all become much more democratic, which I think is an advantage. And this was an argument that came up in an industry group that I was at a meeting for one time, early on in the evolution of computers, and people were saying, all of our work's going to be taken away. And the secretary can do the newsletter now. And someone stood up and said, just because a typewriter came out didn't mean we didn't need writers anymore.
Yeah.
And it was a really good point. And there was a lot of discussion after that about the cream of the crop, the better jobs that we'll work on because the secretary can do the newsletter now. It's not quite as simple and black and white as that. And that was probably an 8 or 10-year-old conversation in the industry, because now a lot of our clients will design something and give them a template, and then they do carry it out. We've got a client that we're doing that for now. We designed a lot of their TV, we produced their radio, print, web ads, things like that. We gave the print templates to them, and then they were able to expand that and carry it on. We're a small agency, so we don't want to do every little piece of production necessarily. We might even farm that out to a freelancer. But in that case, the client was able to say, I've got a couple of people in-house that can produce this. I've got a designer, a young designer on staff, and I've got somebody who can do some of the web production. So it's good for them. It's good that they can do that, and we work more on the things that we want to work on rather than doing the everyday production thing,
Yeah.
and having a big staff that we have to then manage and carry that staff and the overhead that comes with it.
It seems like even with this, and I loved your phrase, the democratic revolution.
Yeah.
It seems while there is access to more creative than ever before, there's still no less of a need for those creative directors, the art director,
Right.
to tie it in together, to pick the photography, to communicate, whether it be visually, emotionally, or the combination of. If I heard you correctly, there is no less work out there. The work is just shifting in terms of what is still need to be done by professionals and what can be sort of managed by anybody who's willing to learn.
Yeah, that's one of the discussions or arguments we have almost every day, internally and even with our clients, because it still comes down to you've got to have a great idea. You have an issue, you have a problem, you want to sell more of your product or service, you want to influence people's thinking on an issue, whatever it happens to be. We have lots more tools to do that with now, and a lot more people know how to use those tools, some effectively, some not so effectively. But how you develop a message, come up with a creative concept, execute that concept, those are all still the things that people hire us to do, and so that's for us a lot of the fun things, and that's on that design side of my brain. Now, it's not left or right necessarily. I think they're both right, but the art and design side are both. There's still the art aspect that I'm passionate about, but the design part, whether it's developing a new logo or laying out a page or art directing a TV shoot, those are all still what we bring to the table with our experience, and so there's where that passion for me is very fluid. Sometimes if I'm doing my own personal thing, if I'm doing a drawing or a painting or something that's just totally for me, just a creative exercise.
Because it needs to be.
Exactly, excuse me. That's very fun, but that fluidity also works through to if I'm developing an icon or an identity for a company, that I can work with graphic elements or typography or color or form or shape or pattern or whatever it is. Again, that's where I am really happy.
Yeah, reflecting on what you said, there's the content that is created is really just a symptom of the concept,
Right.
that the artist is bringing to life.
Right.
And one of the criteria that I believe is appropriate to this notion of passion is that I can't not do this.
Right.
And with the art and how you describe is such that you would be doing this even if this was your nighttime hobby.
I had a good friend. I rented a studio space for a number of years from a good friend, and I was trying to decide one year whether to renew it and keep the lease, and because I wasn't getting in and painting as much as I needed to or wanted to, and she kind of mockingly said, "Well, that's okay. It's just your artistic soul. No big deal." So, and yeah, okay, thanks. I feel better about myself now. But the truth was, we used to kind of joke. We would have shows in the gallery, and I can't tell you how many artists would say that same thing. I have to do this. It's not like I have an option. I just do this. But the other thing was, it was, to many of us, it was almost like therapy. I mean, there's an aspect of self-discovery, and it's always been hard for me to articulate to somebody who doesn't do it. But if you get into whatever your creative expression is, whether it's writing or drawing or painting or surfing or whatever your thing is, there's a place there that you want to keep going back to. And I kind of kick myself because I don't have that studio any longer, but I'm also finding other outlets. Again, sort of that evolution of digital. I've found some ways, even on my phone, to be able to play with drawing apps, and so there's some new things that I want to keep exploring. And then once you explore that and learn about it, how do you bring that back into everyday the work upstairs where the office is? How do we bring that in? And with the gallery, what I started to say before was, on more than one occasion, we had clients come into the gallery and we'd be walking through on the way to a meeting, and they'd stop and look at a piece on the wall and say, "I really like that piece of art." And as we were talking about their particular project, 2 annual reports that I can think have come to mind. and a poster for a theater, where we said, let's use that, or let's use something like that. And we would hire the photographer in one case, or pay a royalty to an illustrator in another case, to use the artwork that they had developed, expressing something completely different, but it fit the bill. And that's, to me, always kind of the perfect storm. I mean, it's just great when that happens.
It's interesting, the relationship between what an artist is trying to communicate and what the observer is receiving.
Right, right.
And it's very personal, and I wonder how much overlap there is, if any, between the two.
Yeah.
Because you can make it be whatever you want. To me, it means.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the beauty of it. It's kind of the challenge of it from the design world side too, because sometimes you're expressing something, this represents or this suggests X, and the client sees something and they're like, well, no, that's completely different. So I won't go into all my design speak, but there are setting parameters and expectations at the front end of how do you define this problem, because that's what we're going to solve. That's this, we're going to come up with a solution, and we need to know as much about what those parameters are when we start, so that when we come back and present this, we can say, here's what you told us. It needs to do X and Y and Z, and here's how it solves those problems. And that's kind of the analytical side of the design part, which I enjoy as much, but it doesn't have any of that sort of right brain, fluffy, artsy kind of soft stuff. You're trying to really go with more hard facts on that sort of thing. So there's an attraction for me to both sides.
What are the things that you do to nurture this passion? From knowing you as I do, your work is an aspect to do so. But what are some of the other ways that you essentially encourage yourself to continue?
It used to just always be creating more artwork and just trying to do more. And after a certain age, at a certain point in my life and point in my career, I felt a need to sort of be more involved and give back a little bit. Early on, I joined AIGA. It's a design organization for graphic design. And I joined the board, and then I served on the board, and then served as the president of the Indianapolis chapter, and tried to basically, spread the gospel to other young designers that if you want to be involved in your industry, you can give back. And like anything else, it's one of those situations where the more you give, the more you get back. Yeah. And that chapter, we were charter members back in 90 or 91, I think it was, and it's blown up. I mean, it was 50 or 75 members when we started, and the last time I heard it was well over 300 or 400. So it's a great chapter. Later on, when we relocated to Mass Ave, and we had this great idea, let's have a gallery. We had no idea what we were doing, but let's have a gallery, because we had a lot of friends that did artwork. We also worked with some other local folks like Mark Rushman, who had a gallery on the Mass Ave district for about 25 years, and a number of other downtown gallery folks. And we were charter members in IDATA, the Indianapolis Downtown Artists and Dealers Association. And that kicked off the first Fridays that got the downtown galleries all showing their work. And we had the gallery for 15 years. We've just recently taken a break and have taken a vacation from having shows. But it was a way to not only be involved as artists, but also to show the rest of the city and the rest of the region the quality of art that's here. And that was another very much strong give back, but we got so much out of it and met so many great. We started with, we know a couple dozen artists. Well, we probably showed several hundred artists' work here over that 15-year period from all diverse groups. It was great fun and great learning experience. And then the last thing that I've gotten involved with most recently is the Design Art Society out at the IMA, the Indianapolis Museum of Art. There's a Design Arts department which focuses on a lot of furniture, lighting, interior design, architecture, primarily from sort of mid-century. They're actually expanding, and again, I've served a board position and was president last year. As we're trying to raise funds, they're going to expand from about a 400 square foot gallery to a 10,000 square foot gallery. Wow. It'll have the largest modern design art collection in the country, if not the world. and it's supposed to open later this year, 2013. So it's interesting because on the AIGA side, it was all about the design industry. The IDATA thing was all about the arts and downtown. And then the Design Art Society is a bit of a blending, but it's a broader field than just graphic design, all these other groups. And that's one of the things, those sort of fuel the passion, but again, I think you get back more than you give on those sort of opportunities. So, as well as speaking to students and trying to kind of get out once in a while and just share what we do with people, and then still stoke my own fires and try to be creative as much as I can in the office and out of the office.
Excuse me. It seemed by its very nature, art has to be shared.
Yeah.
It is not something to be hoarded. Does it even exist if someone isn't there to, even criticize it? You are living proof of the personal and professional rewards of following your passions. I'm wondering, what advice would you have from somebody who's just beginning to recognize their own passion?
Again, speaking to students, I think it has given me the opportunity to sort of share what I've done, and I think just being out there and talking to folks. When I grew up, I didn't really have much of that. I knew my uncle was an art director, but I didn't really know what that meant. My mom would say, he designed this book cover, or he designed such and such. I kind of didn't get that, and I think by going out and talking to students, and then, like I said, my daughter, I've got 4 kids, and only one of them was kind of nutty enough to go in that direction, but it's been interesting to be able to talk to her and show her things, and then pretty soon she starts showing me things back, and artists that I'm not familiar with, and I'm like, man, that's pretty cool. So I think that's probably the best way, is just going out and talking to people about it and just sharing. Like I said, it has to be shared one form or another, whether you're talking about it or maybe going and viewing it, going to shows and things on your own. Whenever I'm in certain towns or cities, I try to go and visit what's going on in that town and see what exhibits they might have, and then of course books and internet. And I could spend all my day just doing that. So.
Oh yeah. But somewhere out there, somebody is doing what you want to be doing.
Yeah.
Go find them, go talk to them.
Right. And that's the thing. I think it's so much easier now with the digital access. I keep finding, I saw someone had posted a question on a forum, where do you look for design inspiration? And the first answer somebody posted was www.designinspiration.com. And I got to check that out. And there's like probably 4 URLs that are almost exactly like that. And you get into Tumblr and you start finding, Tumblr especially is something where people are making things. Pinterest has got a bazillion things. I've tried to avoid that one up to this point, but I'm sure at some point I'll get suckered into it.
It's a bit of a black hole.
It is.
Actually a very colorful hole,
well,
but it's a hole.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there are so many points of access. You've almost got to, for me at least, I probably would be diagnosed ADD a little bit today if if that was in my day, that wasn't such a big thing. But there's so much to look. I have to kind of narrow down and say, what do I want to spend my time on here? What am I looking at? And is it architecture? Is it furniture? Is it typography? And what are the things that I really want to get focused on? So there's just so many ways to find it out there, and I'm not sure if I gave you a good, simple, straight answer or not on that.
I don't need you to. So lastly, this is kind of the plug section. How can somebody share your passion with you?
Well, as you mentioned, I work with Axiomport. We're glad to work with a number of different range of clients, from small nonprofits to very large ones. So that's one way to share that. I think through those 3 organizations I mentioned before, very strong groups. AIGA is specifically for designers, whether you're a student or a professional and been in the industry for a long time. IDATA still does their first Fridays. They have a lot of, they've really grown a lot and have a good say in what's going on in town. A lot of people last year, when Indianapolis hosted the Super Bowl, might remember the event called Turf. We helped brand that. Our firm, Axiomport, helped brand that. We came up with a name and an identity and helped give all the graphic look to it, the look and feel, if you will. So IDATA is a great organization to get involved with, and either from an internal aspect or from an external aspect, just to see what's going on in the arts community. And as I say, the Design Art Society is going to be blowing out this new gallery this year, so we're very excited about, they're acquiring new pieces because they want to represent Asian, North American, and European art, so they're bringing all kinds of new things into the city that I think is going to really, we're very excited. Michael Graves is coming next month to talk. We're doing a little get-together fundraiser, and he's donating a large chunk of his collection to the museum, specifically for the gallery, as well as Alessi and several other sort of design icons. So there's a lot of ways that people can share the kind of passions that I have. And again, I mean, just being aware, looking for it, whether it's in a library or online. There are some great films. There's a film called Helvetica that, if you're not familiar with, you want to check out. And the same director of Helvetica has done 2 more films.
Objectified?
Objectified was one.
It's one of my favorites.
The other one was Urbanized or something like that. But Helvetica was my passion. And it turned me on to L1011, a great band that has the music for the background. So it's just, it can be anywhere and everywhere. And that was always the joke in our industry, was if we could ever learn to tell our mom what it is we do, because the default answer is, well, my son works in advertising. That's close. Good enough, Mom. But the truth is, everything we look at and see and do to some degree involves design. Maybe not necessarily art, but the design aspect. And to me, the art and Indy has really gotten behind public art, what's happened in the Mass Ave district, what's happened on the Cultural Trail. It's enthusiastic, because I came back here from New York after I lived out there for about 5 years. And Indianapolis, I thought, really had done a lot back in 1985, and it was an embryo compared to what it is now. And I'm real proud of our town and what we do here. And so I think there's a lot of places to see and share good art and design.
Well, thank you, Scott. I want to say how much I appreciate you sharing
Absolutely.
Your passion with me.
Thank you.
And until next time, thank you.
Anytime.